Hello everybody! So this is the second tutorial video in this series on creating a crate asset for video games. So the model I have right here is the one that I was showing you in the previous video, and to be honest, it lacks in imagination and it's a little too simple for my liking. So what I expect is a little bit more from your guys' project than what I have here. The only reason I kept it really simple like this is just so these tutorial videos aren't crazy long. But if you were to go on with this kind of design, I would expect something like handles on the side, maybe door hinges, maybe even something like damage. So something that would add some more features to this. So this is a little plain. Anywho, let's go ahead and start unwrapping this piece. So what we're looking at here is one big rectangle and a bunch of different slates. And there's a couple of things we can do to save ourselves the trouble of having to unwrap all of these pieces. So what we'll do is unwrap these pieces and then just duplicate this after we're done and delete these. But this one will have to be all unique. So let's go ahead and start with it first. Before I do, let's add a couple of fun pieces of geometry to it. It's just a little too boring for me even to just mess around with. So I'm going to go into in the face mode, and I'm going to make a couple of new extrusions. And I'm just doing this really quickly. And then I'm going to grab these faces, and I think I want to extrude these. I'll pull these in. And what you can see is when I did that, sorry if you hear noise, my cat just decided it wanted to be a parrot. So what happened is when I pulled these faces back, this edge is now kind of embedded kind of in a weird way into the rest of this model. So after I do this, what I'm going to have to do is pull this edge back in. So let me do that real quick. I'm going to go into edge mode. And you can see I'm going to grab this and now pull it in. And you know what? I'm going to do this another way. So I'm back to my extrusion. I haven't extruded yet. So I can grab one of these faces and pull it. And you can see it hasn't been extruded. So I'm going to grab these, and now I'm going to extrude again, and I'm going to pull it in, and now I'm going to scale it in. So this will save me a little bit of trouble, and I think I'll extrude it out a little bit less. I think something like that looks real nice. Alright, and the next tool I want to show you is the Merge Vertice tool again. I think I've already showed you that, but I'm going to go over it once more. So all I have to do is first I have to go into my vertex mode, hold down shift, right click, and then there's merge vertices up here at the top. I'm going to hover over that, and now I'm going to scroll down to the merge vertex tool, and now I get my arrows, and what I want to do is just pull this up here and do the same thing down here. So basically what I have now is just kind of an indentation on the side of this. And I didn't just come up with this idea. I've done this once or twice before. And I think it's a kind of really cheap and easy, cool looking device for making kind of more of an impact when we look at this right away. So maybe even one more thing to make this a little bit more complicated. I'm going to select these faces. Cool. And I'm going to extrude once more. And I'm going to grab this blue arrow and pull it in this way. I'm going to scroll in some. I'm going to click on the scale tool, and I want to scale it in. I'm not sure how I'm liking that, actually. before I commit, let me try a little experiment. I'm going to go back to that, into my vertice mode, merge vertex tool. I'm going to try pulling these up. Let's see if that looks any good. And no, I don't like that at all. So I'm just going to undo all that. We'll just stick with this for now. Alright, so let's go ahead and start unwrapping this. So as I showed you before, when we go into the UV unwrapper, we just go under Edit UVs and then UV Texture Editor. And when we open this up, it's going to automatically select the UVs of whatever object is selected. So if I click off to the side, it's not going to show anything. So you have to make sure that your object is actually selected. And what we're looking at here is kind of the stock UVs of a box. It's kind of laid out this way. And we could almost actually use these, but not quite, because we did some extrusions. Those faces aren't represented in here. You actually don't really see those right now. So we're going to have to unwrap this ourselves. So let's get started by first adding this toggle shaded UV display mode. By clicking this, we get more color, and what this color represents is the difference between a UV that's overlapping or maybe facing the wrong way. So let me give you an example. I'm going to right click and then hover over UV, and this is called, well, these are UVs. So these are basically vertices, but only in the UV editor. So these are UVs, but they act just like vertices, but on a 2D plane. So I can drag and move this around. As you can see, when I overlap this, there is shades of kind of like magenta and then red over here. The red indicates that the face is flipped and it's pointing the wrong way. Magenta means there's red on top of blue, so that's all stuff we want to avoid. So the way that we're going to do this box, actually we could do, and I'm thinking about this as a really simple shape first, so just a rectangle. I'm not worried about all this stuff yet, but as a rectangle, what I think I want to do is have this side, this side, this side, and this side be all one piece, and then maybe I'll cut the seam right along this edge down here so that that's kind of hidden on the bottom. And then what I think I'll do is add this end and this end separately. They'll be their own kind of little thing on the side. And what you want to try to do is minimize how many different UV shells you have. If you have the opportunity to keep them all together, that's the best thing, because what you're doing is avoiding texture seams. And the less texture seams you have, the less likely someone's going to find one. So that's what we're going to do. So what I want to do is first select all these faces for these sides, the longer ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a mode where I can, oh, actually I don't even have to go into a separate view mode. I can see the side of the box clearly right here. And I'm just going to marquee select all of these faces, and we can see it's exactly what I wanted. These end caps will be separate. Perfect. Alright, so next we have to generate new UVs, because we can't just use the ones that are here. We have to generate some new ones, kind of starting fresh. So I'm going to create UVs. I'm going to come up here, and what I want to do is called a planar mapping. I'm going to click this little box to give myself some more options. And what a planar map is literally projecting the UVs in one direction. So if this was in the y-axis, which I think we're going to choose, the y-axis means it's looking straight down, so it's going to try and project this straight on itself. So it's a little hard to explain, but I'm going to apply just to see what we're getting at. And you can see that my shape doesn't really resemble the same proportions over here. It's kind of a square. So that's actually kind of wrong for us. So let me try this again and enable a different feature. So I'm going to go into face mode. Grab all these faces, make sure I get them all. Double check my work to make sure I got them all. Perfect. And I'm going to look at this planar mapping option again. But I want to make sure that I click something very essential for this, which is keep image width height ratio. Height? Anyways, so if I use it this time, you can see that now it retains the correct ratio. And that's exactly what I want. I want less work to unwrap, and this is how we do it. So now that I have all these as one piece, you see that this is actually magenta right now, so we're getting a problem. So what we have to do is unfold this. And if we remember from class, the way we do this is by splitting up all these faces, which have to be connected at the moment, and cutting an edge so that they're at least one separated edge, and we can fold it flat. So the edge I want to pick is this one right down here. And let me minimize this so I can illustrate this a little better. So the reason I'm choosing this edge, first of all, it's kind of on the bottom and it's out of the way. If this is on the ground, no one's ever going to notice. The second reason is because this edge goes across the entire length of all of these faces that wrap around like this. So I literally only have to cut one edge to split this apart. So I have that edge selected, and it looks like my UV box was freaking out. Sorry about that. And I'm going to go up here to the separate the UVs along selected edges button. I'm going to click that once or twice. And now I have to go back into my UV mode. And I do that simply enough by right-clicking in the UV texture editor and hovering over UV, just like all the other modes. And next I want to marquee select this whole UV shell. So these are all called shells. Anything that's separate between everything that's separate is called a shell. So I'm going to select all the vertices, all the UVs in the shell, and I'm going to select this button up here, which is the Smooth UV tool. So I'm going to click on that, and now I'm presented with this button down here that says Unfold and one that says Relax. And then this, which is just allows you to move it around if you'd like, although I never really have to. Anyways, the way this works is first you have to click on the Unfold button, and you have to make sure that you don't click off. And then what you just saw is that when I move to the right, it starts to unwrap this. Watch me do the wave. Pretty cool. So in this instance, it unfolded beautifully. It's exactly what I wanted. But there are a couple of tools, there are a couple of options within this tool which can affect how this unfolds. And the way we check that out is by double-clicking on this tool. And you'll see that this opened a new window in my main editor, and you'll see that there's pretty much only two things here. Well, there's three things here. Pin borders means that it won't affect any of the UVs along the border, which is not what we want. And then there's this space. So space, UV space versus world space. I don't know the exact math on how these work, but essentially what this one is doing is trying to calculate the best average based off of UV space. And it knows the size of these faces, so it's trying to do that. World space is considered more about the orientation, the relative orientation of these faces to each other. So I usually keep it on UV space. This gives me the best results most of the time, but I think by default it's set to world, so that's something that you might have to change. Alright, so I can go back into UV mode, and I can hit my W key to get my move tool, and I can move this around. I'm going to set it over here kind of off to the side while we do the last couple faces on this one box. So remember, we have those other things that we have to play around with, but this one is nearly done. So this time I'm going to do these faces over here. So I can do that simply enough by marquee selecting, and you can see that I've accidentally grabbed all these, but that was actually intentional. Now I'm going to hold down the control button and deselect those, and you can see that I get exactly what I want. I don't have to scroll in and click on every single one of these. And as I'm working at normal speed, it would be something like this. It's super fast. And like I said in class, 3D artists are always trying to cut down on our time spent doing random functions. So we're going to do the same thing we did before and create a new planar map. I'm going to click on the options again because we have to change this axis. Because if it was projecting down, if we look at that, it's not going to give us the best result off the bat. What we want to do is pick a new orientation. And if we look down here at the bottom, we can see that the x-axis is the red one. That's this way. So if we were looking down this axis, that's more of what we're looking for. So I'm going to choose the x-axis and hit apply. Now what you'll see is I have this box, but it's red. Why is it red? Well, the reason it's red is because when it applied this planar map, it wasn't looking at it from this side. It was looking at all those faces from this side. So it applied the UVs on the back side of all these faces. And we don't want that. We have to make sure that in our UVs, anything is red is turned back to blue. So to do that real quick, we go into UV mode, select the entire shell. There's a new feature in there's a new feature in Maya 2015 that allows you to grab shells really quickly, and that is the shell mode. You just click on it once, and you can start moving around. This is super cool. Try to use this as often as you can. But we actually have to, well, actually, you know what? We could probably just go into shell mode. Let's try that real quick. And then I'm going to scroll up here to the top, and I'm going to look for these two buttons up here. So what these are is flip selected UVs along U direction, and this is the, what is the other weird direction? V direction. Oh, UV, haha. What I want, and the illustration kind of helps here, is to flip them across this way. And the reason why is because I don't want the top to become the bottom if I flipped it the other way. I want just the right to become the left. So I'm going to hit this, and you'll see it didn't move at all. It just turned blue. So that's exactly what I wanted. Now, I'm going to show you guys a little kind of advanced trick, and this is used to save us a little time and a lot of energy. So what I'm going to do is I'm still in UV shell mode. So what I'm going to do, UV shell, looks what it, yes, that's a problem. So what it did is it created this shell separated. It looks like every single one of these faces is separate. So we're going to have to undo this. We're going to have to create a new UV shell. And that's okay. It seems like this is actually one of the weird quirks in 2015, and I'm not exactly sure why it does this. But it doesn't take long, so let's go back into face mode and try this again. And the trick I was going to show you is I'm actually going to grab both of these end caps. So both sides are now selected. And now I'm going to do this again and hit apply. And what I just did was create a UV shell on top of a UV shell. And it looks like I still get the same problem as before. Let me try moving this to shell. Okay, maybe it's not a problem. I guess it's not a problem. Okay, so what I just did right there is I'm in UV mode and I click on one of these. I'm not going to click and drag because that would grab both of the UVs here. I'm just going to click on one, and what that's doing is selecting one UV on the top shell. And then I'm going to hold down Control and then right click, and that's to shell. And I can move that down. So this happened to be the red one, so I can just go ahead and flip that real quick. And now we have these two shells, which are exactly the same size. You can see that right here. So I don't have to worry about the scaling relative to each other. But I do have to make sure that these are the same size as this. And before I do that, I want to make sure that I unwrap these a little bit, because if you remember, if we're looking at it right here, there are some faces that are actually in this axis, which would be invisible here. So I have to unwrap these as well. So I'm going to hit the unwrap tool and unfold. Oop. As you can see, sometimes it doesn't stop. It'll let you crunch it down into nothing. So you have to kind of go a little bit until you think you've got it, and then let go. So I think that'll be okay. there's going to be a little bit of UV stretching on these inside faces. These ones right here. But because these faces are so narrow, I'm not too worried about it right now. If it becomes a problem, we can always fix it later. So now what I want to do is grab both of these shells, and now I want to scale them down. I'm going to hit R and scale these down so that they are the same width as these segments down here. So what I know is the height of each of these boxes is the height of this face to this face. It's the same down here, this face to this face. So I'm going to hover these over each other momentarily and kind of get them so where they're matching up. And you can see that now these edges all line up nicely. So I know that these are scaled correctly. Now to double check our work, we can always hit this button right here. And that will allow us to see everything about this, including where we cut our UVs, which was right here. So that's looking pretty good. Everything looks like it's to scale. Pretty close. I could actually probably scale those up a little bit, but I'm going to leave them as they are. So I'm going to click off of that. And the next thing we have to do is scale these down so that they fit within one of these squares. Now at the end of the day, when we're done with our UVs, we're going to have to make sure that they're within this space right here. This is the darker gray space. This is +1 to +1. Anything outside of here will not really be able to be textured in the way we want. So we have to move them here, but we're not done. So I'm going to move these out of the way for a minute while we select our other objects. So I'm going to hit the isolation select button real quick, and I'll close out of the UV editor while we mess around with this stuff. And the only thing I want to grab is one of these, so I don't have to worry about other ones, because I know I still want to, actually I kind of want to play around with these now, because I added this indent right here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the rest of these, and just select this one by itself. Now the next thing I want to go is to my UV editor, and we're seeing something interesting. Instead of having just a normal color blue, we have a much darker color blue. And the reason that is because all these shapes have the same UV set, or at least they look exactly the same, and they're placed right on top of each other, so those multiply into a more opaque UV set. So if I go into UV and I click on one, and then I hold down Control and I right click and I go to shell and I move this over, you can see now it becomes a little less opaque, but this one's nice and translucent. So because I didn't actually change the geometry of this, just the scale, I can actually try unwrapping this and see if that does us any good. So I'm going to click the unfold tool and I'm going to unfold it. And you can see right away that actually looks not too shabby. So I think I'm going to do that with all of these. I'm going to right click on this one. I'm going to go to shell, unfold, and move it over here. Click on this one, to shell, unfold, and that's pretty good. Something that I think I want to do though, before I call this all nice and done, is to rearrange how these are connected. So you can see right now is that these long faces are connected together by this top face up here. So these long faces are wrapping around the top. And this is okay, but I usually want to connect the longer edges together because I want my longer edges to be less often a texture seam, because there's more there that's more likely for someone to see it. And if there's a little texture seam right here, maybe it's less likely for someone to see it because it's smaller. So what I'm going to do is use a new tool, and I'm going to full screen real quick. I'm going to hit my W key just to have the move or the other tool out of the way. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to go into edge mode. And I want to select the edge, this one right here, and I'm going to hit the cut tool. So now I can go to UV, select some, hold down Control, right click, and go to shell. And now this is separated. But Vince, I thought we're not supposed to be separating things. You crazy man. Well, that's okay. We're going to reattach it just as simply as detaching it. So the way we do this is just by going back into edge mode, clicking on the edge that we want to snap together. And in this instance, we can see it's this one right here. We could also choose this one. In this instance, it doesn't really matter. And then there's this button up here, which is called Move and Sew. It's like I don't know, two intersecting arrows. So we can click that, and it moves right there. I'm just going to do it 2 more times. Over here and over here, I just shift selected, cut, edge again, hold the edge, shift, hold an edge, move and sew. Alright, I think that's going to be it for those pieces. So the next thing I want to do is grab both my box and these little pieces here, and now I want to make sure that these are kind of all scaled in a way that I can fit them all on one gray space but maximize how much room they take up. But before I do that, let's decide how many times I want to duplicate this piece. I'm going to move this down for a second, and I'm going to click on this, and I think maybe I'm going to do 3. So I just used Control D to duplicate. And I'm just eyeballing this, obviously. If I wanted to get this more right on the money, I know that this has a pivot point straight in the middle of it. So I can hold down the X key, and what this does is snap to the grid. And because I want to snap it into the middle of the grid this way, I can just grab this arrow and, okay, so it's not quite in the middle, but I'll just eyeball it in there. And I can actually use this scale over here, kind of eyeball this one. So I'm going to move this one so this edge kind of meets this gray edge down here. That's pretty close. And now I can just do the same thing for this side. And I know they're pretty dang close. Alright, so this crate is pretty close to finish. As far as UV goes, we gotta do a lot of texturing next. So let's go ahead and reorganize some UVs. So I'm going to select all my objects really quickly, and then I'm going to hit this button again. And the reason I'm going to do this is so that I can sort out my scaling issues, because you can see that these are a little too much larger in this space because these squares are smaller. So the more room that these take up, the smaller this is going to become. So I'm going to grab my UVs, and I have control over all of these now, and I can start scaling these down. And the funny thing is it makes the rest disappear, so that's a little annoying, but I just have to scale it down and double check. And that's pretty close. Maybe a little bit more. That's pretty close. Not bad. Alright, now the next thing I have to do is make sure that these are all separated, because right now they're all occupying each other's space, and I do not want that. I want everyone to have their own personal space. So I'm going to click on this button to get rid of that crazy headache-inducing texture. And the first thing I want to do is scale up all my pieces so that the largest piece is basically almost touching 2 sides of the square. And what I mean by that is that I want this piece to be touching the top and the bottom. And the next thing I want to do is prioritize my next biggest shapes to get them as close to this piece as possible. And one thing you're going to have to remember is that what we're going to do is create a texture that is so many pixels tall by so many pixels wide. And if we make the space in between these shells smaller than a pixel, there's going to be a problem where one pixel is reaching over and touching the other side where we don't want it. So we have to be a little bit careful when spacing these out, but generally we try to keep them as close as possible. Alright, so the next thing is giving these all their own space. And I know there's going to be 9 of them, and I think I have more than enough space to actually move these all around. So what I want to do is just go into UV mode. I'm going to select one, select another, and I did that because my selector always gets in the way. That's why I went like this. And I'm going to go to shell, and then I can see I'll just move these over to the side. And then I'm going to do it again. Click, click, click to shell, and I'm going to move these over again. And the next thing to do would be to squeeze these in. Oops, I accidentally grabbed something I don't want. You know, I'm so used to doing it this way. I forget there's a shell mode now. Shell. So now I'm just going to start moving these into place. And this is where I like to start playing the Jenga music. Not Jenga music. Tetris music. Okay, so you can see that we have quite a bit of leftover space. And what I always like to do is, if I have all the objects I think I'm going to need, I still try to maximize my UV space. So I have all this free space now, which means that I could add a whole host of weird stuff. So because I have the opportunity, and I might as well go ahead with it. And you can skip this part if you really want to. But I'm going to add some new pieces to this so that we can get some more kind of fancy stuff going on. So what do I want? What do I want? How about those handles I was talking about? So I just created a new cylinder, and I'm going to click over here, and I'm going to make this a little bit less dense. So it's at 20 subdivisions right now. And what I like to do is make sure that when I change this, I change it to something that's divisible by 2 or 4. And the reason I do that is so that if I ever have to, if I need to make room for more polygons somewhere else, I could cut down on this by half, and it would at least have an even number of vertices left. So I'm going to take this from 20 and I'm going to bring it all the way down to 12 because I don't think I need much more than that. And I'm going to rotate it into place where I think I want it. Oops, that was a little too much. Oh, and now Jay is giving me grief. Alright, I'm going to pull it in to here. Kind of rescale it some. And this is going to be my handle. Probably got to be a bigger handle than that, right? Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So the next thing, oh, you know what? I have a good chance to actually just snap this right onto here. And that'll be nice because I can do the same thing over the other edge. So what I'm looking at right now is a cylinder, and you'll notice something that is kind of annoying about it, and that's all these edges have hard normals, and we were talking about those in class. That means it's rendering these as flat. So you see there's one shade of gray here, there's another one here, there's two here, they're pretty similar, and then it goes to another shade. But what if I want these to do a nice soft shade? Well, I can right click and go to edge, select all these, and I'm going to come up here to my normals, and I want to go down here to soften edge. And what you'll see now is that it's a really nice, soft, smooth bar. So normals are really nice in the sense that it can save you a lot of trouble. You can have low poly objects look smoother than they really are, which is pretty cool. So yeah, let me go ahead and find another, let's find a way to attach this. And actually, I think I want to scale it down slightly. And maybe bring it up. Okay. The next thing I want to do is add some structure to make these actually attach to the box. So I'm going to create a box. I'm going to kind of bring it up here, drag it in, and kind of get it. Oh, something else that's really cool is if you have a mesh and you want to move it to something, another object, what you can do is hold down the V key, and this is going to vert snap. So I'm going to vert snap to what I believe is the middle of this. Yep. So you can see, and let me turn on the shading mode up here so I have some wireframe to view. So I know this is in the center of this box, this center pivot. So if I hold down V and I snap it to the center of this, Actually, let me illustrate it with this. So if I snap it straight to the center of this vertice, I know it's right in the middle. And that's kind of what I want in this instance. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to bring this down in. I'm going to bring it over so the faces kind of overlap. And I'm going to scale this in. And I'm going to grab these vertices, and I'm going to make sure it's actually intersecting. And then I think I want to pull this down. Something like that. Yeah, that looks okay. And now I want to do, I want to select this real quick, and I want to delete the faces that I know we're not going to be seeing. And the only faces that are really important to us are the ones on the outside. These ones are intersecting. So I can select these and delete them. Now I got like a little hollow piece of structure here. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is unwrap this so I can duplicate it and move it over here. And then I want to unwrap this so I can duplicate it and move it over there. So let me do this one first. I'll go into my UV editor. Sorry, I had a brain fart. And we can see that it's actually still got all of its UVs. So let's try to be a little sneaky with this. Let's grab all of our UVs and try to unfold. No, it's not terrible. And I'm going to keep it. I'm going to scale it down because I know it's too large and move it down here out of the way. And then I'm going to go to my object mode and grab my cylinder. And because I didn't really change anything but the scale in this one, I can also just unwrap this. And the end caps are going to be exactly the same. They didn't change at all. So all I have to do is go to shell, grab this one, and unwrap this. And there we go. And the next thing I want to do is scale these down because they're way, way, way too large. So each one of these edges is going to match the length of each one of these edges. So you can see that we probably want to bring them down to about that scale. And what I do with these types of things is keep them close together, but generally kind of order it a little bit like this. Alright, so now I have this piece. I can go ahead and duplicate it and move it over. Cool. And I'm going to make sure that I have both of these selected, and I'm going to move one of these UVs so they're not straight on top of each other, just like that. Oh, it's doing that weird optical illusion thing where you think this one's bigger than this one because your eyes work that way. Weird. I've never created an optical illusion on accident. So we're going to grab all these pieces, and because I want to move them all over there, I'm actually going to combine all these. So I'm going to go up into Mesh and then Combine. And what you can see is that actually put my center pivot right at the origin. And because my object is symmetrical on either side, and this is really cool, and this is why I always work on the origin, I can duplicate this object, grab my rotate tool, hold down J, boop, 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 rotate. And there I go. Super simple, piece of cake. I love it. Alright, and the next thing we have to do is make sure that all these UVs have their own space. So grab our optical illusion here, to shell. I'm going to move those down. And actually I think I'm going to rotate them so they kind of fit into each other nicely. How cool is that? Now it's something else completely. And these are just tricks that I've learned over time about how to save as much room as possible. When you have weird shapes like these, if you flip them and rotate them, you save yourself a lot of space because they're kind of contouring into each other. And now I'm going to move all these and these. And I know my bars are much bigger than these pieces. So I'm going to grab all these and I'm going to scale them in to about what I think is right, which is right about there. So the very last thing we have to do, select all of our objects, and now squeeze all of these UVs into space, into the right space. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm not going to worry about the relative scale of these to these right now. I'm just going to fit them into this spot, and I'm going to hit this button to rotate them, and I think that's about all I need as far as scaling it down. And I'm going to go to shell in here. Oops. Just these 3 objects, please. There we go. I'm going to grab all of these. Shell. Oh, running into a problem. No! We can fix this. And this is where UVs can be fun, I guess. Some people like this part of UVing a lot, where they are reorganizing things, getting them exactly as close to as best optimized as they can. I won't be able to fit 3 in there. I grab all of these and I go to shell and I rotate them again. Yep, I'm going to do that. So forget what I was doing down here. Move that back so it's nice and even with itself. I'm going to grab all these end caps, smash them down there. I'm going to grab this, to shell, and I'm going to drag this all the way as close as I can to the edge. There we go. Grab these, pull them all the way over here, and now I should have just enough room to squeak these in. Oh, not enough. I'll scale them in. Nobody will notice. All right. So that's it. One thing I have not done yet. Save scene. I'm such a bad instructor. You guys should be saving way more often than I've been doing currently. All right. So we're done. That's it. You know, not nearly as bad as you might think it might be. So a lot of people really don't like UV unwrapping, and I think it's a nice treat and a nice break from doing all the other stuff. So the last thing I want to do is grab all my objects, and I'm going to go into Mesh Combine. And now they're all one object, so I can move it around, I could duplicate it, and prove that I could duplicate it. And nice thing about this crate is that it looks like it even kind of stacks in an interesting way. What if I was to rotate it? Has that got any function to it? Oh, happy accidents. There's no accidents, only happy accidents. What is it? Anyways. So I'm going to grab this and drag it right back to the origin. Right in the center. Perfect. Easy peasy. So in review, what we did is we took our box, we did a little upgrades to the surface of it. We changed a couple of things. We added some extrusions, made it look a little bit better. And then what we did was started unwrapping. And we did this by first doing some planar mapping, cutting some edges and unfolding, and then doing one object once and then laying out its UVs and then duplicating that. And then we realized we had all this extra space, so it's like, oh, what are we going to do with the space? Oh, handles, yeah. And there you go. So if you're ever running out of space, what you'll obviously have to do is scale things down to kind of squeeze everything else back in. But in this case, we got pretty lucky. So I'm actually going to do this real quick because I'm a little, kind of even this out. Now this is, I don't mean to brag or anything, but this would be A-level work as far as laying out your UVs. You know, the industry is considering every wasted pixel, everything that's not being occupied by a UV shell as wasted money. And if you have the skills to organize these in a way where you're using as little space as possible, you will be considered much more valuable as an artist. Alright, that's it for UVs. The next video section is going to be all about how to texture. And what we'll do in that video is export an image of what we're looking at here, and we'll bring that into Photoshop and start doing some fun stuff. Alright, thanks guys. I'll see you in the next video.